They called him their perfect son. Then he killed them in cold blood and asked 911 to pray. 14-year-old Trevor Lee walked over a mile in the dark to a church, stripped of his belongings, and calmly told dispatchers that he had just shot David Lee and Brandy Smith, the same parents who had taken him to the movies hours earlier. Now investigators are uncovering every stomach-turning moment of that night, from the quiet bedroom where the murders happened, to the person thousands of miles away who got the first call, to the best friend who still swears the boy he knew could never do this. But the deeper they look, the more impossible it is to explain how a perfect day ended with 2 bodies in a bed. Let's unpack it all. It's just after midnight in Middleburg, Florida, when the Clay County 911 center picks up a call that doesn't sound like panic or chaos or even desperation. The voice on the line is calm, almost polite, and belongs to a 14-year-old boy.
911, how can I help you?
Hello, I'm by the road. I threw my backpack away from me. I'm stripped. I'm waiting for the police.
What do you mean you're
I
stripped?
have nothing in my pocket. I emptied my pockets and everything.
The dispatcher tries to keep him calm, talking, unsure if this is a prank, an ambush, or even worse. He tells her he's at the Cross Point Church, standing under the big cross out front, just waiting to be arrested. But it's not the location or his strange composure that shakes the call taker. It's what he admits next.
I'm gonna pray first. I need to pray.
You need to pray?
Yes, ma'am.
In that redacted part of the call, Trevor Lee tells the dispatcher that he just took his parents' lives and that they're actually still in their beds back at their Silver Point home. And yet, when Trevor starts talking about praying, the dispatcher's voice softens.
Do you pray?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, I'll listen to you.
Well, I was gonna ask if you could pray for me, ma'am. Right now.
I'll definitely be praying for you, son. Okay, we've asked them not to point guns at you. Okay.
It's a strange, surreal exchange, one that lasts just long enough for deputies to reach the church parking lot and take him into custody without a fight. Sheriff Michelle Cook will later say her team wasn't sure if this was real when the call came in. Clay County had been dealing with swatting incidents, fake emergencies meant to lure police into dangerous situations, and the thought crossed her mind. But when deputies made entry into the Lee home, the scene told them this wasn't a prank.
Preliminary investigation, and we're still very early in this investigation.
Both parents were dead, and the gun had come from inside the house. Still, the question lingered. What makes a teen walk away from a crime scene and straight into the arms of the law? Because before he called 911, Trevor dialed someone else, and what he said to her has never been made public. What's wilder, she was 2,500 miles away, with no idea she'd become the only witness to his final words before the murder went public. Hours before the 911 call, everything looked picture perfect. Trevor Lee wasn't grounded, he wasn't sulking in his room, and he wasn't in trouble. He was out with David and Brandy, the parents who raised him, cheered him on at football, and treated his friends like their own kids. Here's what Trevor's best friend, Kiri, told the media after the case made headlines.
They were probably the best or one of the best families I knew. They were funny and they treated me very well. They told me all the time that they loved me like a son and they treated me as such.
But we'll get into that in a bit. Here's what Trevor's sister told the media from California, still trying to understand what she was hearing. She wasn't talking about some random Sunday errand either. They'd all gone to see a film together, grabbed food, and laughed. And yet, before sunrise, both of those parents would be shot multiple times in their bed. No struggle, no warning. No signs they even woke up before it happened. Investigators say that the gun came from inside the home, Brandy's firearm, and Trevor knew exactly where to find it. Friends could not wrap their heads around it. The police talked to lots of people who knew Trevor, and everyone confirmed the same story. He didn't seem the angry type. He never complained about his parents, and before unaliving them both, he chatted casually with his besties. No mention of anything brewing inside his mind. Sheriff Michelle Cook later confirmed there'd been some kind of fight in the house earlier that night.
It appears that there was some sort of domestic argument last night between Trevor Lee and his parents. and that this shooting culminated from that argument.
She wouldn't say what it was about, only that Trevor seemed to sit with it for a couple of hours before making his move. That detail matters because it means that this wasn't some split-second explosion. He had time to cool down, and he chose not to. By the time the rest of the world was asleep, David and Brandy were gone, and Trevor was walking away from the house that had been his whole life. And the first person he decided to tell wasn't a neighbor, it wasn't a teacher, and it wasn't 911. After the shots were fired, Trevor didn't panic and run. He didn't try to hide what he had done. Instead, he reached for the phone and called someone who wasn't even in Florida, his sister. She was thousands of miles away, stationed in California with the military, probably thinking this was just another late-night check-in. But whatever Trevor said to her in those moments is locked away in redacted transcripts. Investigators are not letting the public hear it just yet. All we know is she hung up, called 911 in her own state, and begged them to send help to a house she couldn't even see.
Are you there with him? Please send help. No, I'm all the way in California. Please, I need you to send help. What makes you? I don't know. I don't know where he's at. I have no idea where he's at, but please, hurry up.
While this was happening, Trevor was already walking down dark roads toward the Cross Point Church, stripped of his backpack, hands empty, waiting for the cops to come take him. For detectives, this call became a turning point in the investigation. Sheriff Cook says they believe Trevor made the call while walking that 1.5 miles to church, which means his sister may have been the very first person to hear him admit to their parents. The details of that conversation could change everything. The motive, the timeline, even how the prosecutors decide to handle this case. But until she's flown back to Florida for questioning, the only people who truly know what she said are her, Trevor, and the investigators who've listened to the full recording. And that secrecy is fueling even more questions. Did she tell him to call 911? Did he confess right away? Or is there something else in that conversation that explains why a 14-year-old walked out into the night ready to face whatever came next? After all, he didn't have the common sense or empathy to stop the attack before it happened. So why so much regret now? Because once he got to the church, the way he waited for the police looked less like fear and more like he was there for something bigger. It's the middle of the night in Middleburg, Florida. No cars on the road, no people outside, and almost no CCTV footage to trace Trevor's movements. But something about the timeline stuck out to the sheriff. You see, Sheriff Cook says it was about 1.5 miles from the Lee home to the Cross Point Church. Maybe 15 minutes on foot. That's 15 minutes of silence after gunfire. 15 minutes for reality to sink in, or for nerves to kick in, or for regret to creep up. But from the way Trevor described it to the 911 dispatcher, it didn't sound like regret.
I'm gonna pray first. I need to pray.
He wasn't hiding in the shadows or looking for an escape. He was standing in the middle part of the church, right by a huge cross, telling dispatch exactly where to find him. And he wanted to pray before deputies got there. And when the protective sweep confirmed David and Brandy were dead in their bed, every deputy on duty knew what came next. They converged on the church. One spotted Trevor from a distance but didn't rush in, not until backup arrived. They had no idea if he still had the gun on him. He didn't. He went quickly, quietly in handcuffs with no resistance whatsoever, but no expression on his face either. But what deputies found back at the house made it clear. This wasn't some sudden accident. This had been brewing for hours. When deputies stepped into the Silver Point house, the first thing they saw was how it still was. There were no signs of a fight, no mess, no glass shards or blood smeared down hallways, just the quiet hum of a Florida night and the heavy smell that always follows gunfire. David and Brandy Lee were in their bed with multiple gunshot wounds each. Investigators noted they would have had no chance to call for help or even get up because they were asleep when it happened, and Trevor never gave them a warning. The weapon belonged to Brandy. It wasn't in a safe, it wasn't locked away, and Trevor knew where to find it. That detail has already stirred debate among locals because in Florida, keeping a gun unsecured around your kid isn't illegal, but it's dangerous.
They shouldn't just be easily accessible or laying out kind of willy-nilly for anybody to handle.
That's right.
Detectives started piecing together the family's history. Clay County Sheriff's Office records showed 5 previous calls to the home since 2021. 1 for a self-removal threat, another for a disturbance, 2 for a sick person. And just a few months ago in April, something vague listed as an unknown follow-up investigation. None of those past calls could have predicted this, at least not in the eyes of the friends and family who said the Lees were good parents. Here is Brandy's cousin in a state of shock. First time, he refused to talk to the media. Second time, he only said this:
I guess I never know what caused him to do that, because like I say, he had good parents.
And maybe he's right. Maybe we don't know, not yet. But the records show something was simmering in that house. And it might all come down to one argument no one saw coming. Sheriff Michelle Cook won't say exactly what the fight was about, but she talked to Trevor about it for hours. And speaking to Law and Crime, she made a few things clear. It happened earlier in the evening, a few hours before the murders, and it was not a quick flare-up that fizzled out. According to investigators, Trevor sat with that for a while, thought about it, and instead of letting it pass, he made a decision.
He felt that that this was his only way out, so to speak, was to take matters into his own hands. Very, very sad.
That's how the sheriff put it, his only way out. But can a teen's way out be loading his mother's gun and walking to his parents' bedroom while they were vulnerable? The exact timing is still a puzzle. Detectives haven't confirmed whether Trevor left right after pulling the trigger or if he stayed in the house for a while.
I don't know if he left immediately after killing his parents and walked to the church, or if he waited around and then walked to the church.
What they do know is that sometime between the shots and his arrival at the church, he also made those two crucial calls, first to his sister and then to 911. To the outside world, Trevor was the kid you would never expect this from. And like this reporter says,
I mean, these kids are shocked. They can't believe it, these friends of Trevor Lee.
Yeah, too rarely we think of the devastating effect actions like Trevor's have on an entire community. Not just the victims, but all the people left in a state of shock, terror, or mistrust for the rest of their lives. Trevor's bestie, Kiri, said he still wants to think of Trevor in this light.
He's not a bad person just because he made one bad decision. He's done so much for everyone I know, and I don't want him just to be known as a killer or a murderer.
And yet, in that moment after the argument, he crossed a line you cannot walk back from. There's no evidence his parents hurt him or threatened him that night. After speaking of Kiri, the guy who ate every week at the Lee house and saw them as his second family, here's what Trevor told him just before his heinous act. It was just after midnight when Trevor's best friend's phone lit up. He picked up expecting a quick laugh, maybe a dumb meme setup, the kind of nothing conversation teenage boys have at night. Instead, Trevor's voice came through low and steady.
He told me that he loved me, and he told me that he was just calling to tell me goodnight.
Kiri didn't think much of it at the time. They were close. Just like Trevor's parents had called him son, Trevor called him brother.
He says he and Trevor played football together, and just this past Friday, Trevor and his dad, David Lee, gave him a ride to and from practice.
So when he heard "I love you," he thought it was a little melodramatic from his 14-year-old bro. But hey, Kiri couldn't have guessed in a million years what this really meant for Trevor. Hours later, he was standing outside the Lee house, staring at police tape, trying to understand how his second family was gone, and his best friend was under arrest.
I just didn't think it was real.
For investigators, though, that call wasn't just sentimental. It was a timestamp. It locked Trevor's movements, his mindset, and maybe even his intent in place, minutes before the murders. And the fact that it was so normal, so free of any sign of what was about to happen, made it even more disturbing. Because in just a few days, prosecutors would have to decide if that same voice, the one asking a friend for nothing more than a good night, should now be treated like an adult killer in court. In Florida, 14 is young, but not too young to be charged as an adult for murder. And in Clay County, where prosecutors have a history of going hard in high-profile cases, legal experts are already predicting that's exactly what's going to happen.
Now, there are still so many questions that we really don't have the answers to right now, and one is whether Trevor Lee will be charged as an adult.
Right now, Trevor's facing 2 counts of second-degree murder, but former Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg says that's just the starting point.
Because if you treat this as a juvenile crime, then you're limited to the sanctions that can be imposed. The juvenile system will lose jurisdiction over you at the age of 19.
This means, in theory, Trevor could walk free before he's old enough to rent a car. For a community already shaken to its core, that's a scenario many can't stomach.
This person, no matter what motivated him to do this, you would probably say that he deserves to be treated by the criminal justice system beyond the next 5 years, that this is not someone who you would want let out on the streets at the age of 20.
Charging him as an adult changes the game. It opens the door to a life sentence, even without the death penalty, which the Supreme Court has ruled unconstitutional for minors. But it also means a 14-year-old would be entering a legal system designed for grown men, facing decades behind bars before he ever sees the outside again. The sheriff says Trevor's been extremely cooperative since his arrest, talking detectives through his thought process, but the cooperation won't erase the fact that 2 people are dead, and prosecutors don't seem interested in offering an easy way out. Still, even in the toughest counties, there is room for debate. Was this a moment of teenage impulsivity spiraling out of control? Or was it something darker? Something that justifies locking him up for life? Remember that self-removal threat the police were called to Trevor's house for some years ago? What if this is a case of mental illness gone untreated and neglected by his parents until the last drop? And even so, do any parents deserve this fate? In any case, and no matter the legal conclusions, experts agree on one thing.
And now the son is going to face repercussions really the rest of his life, and I'm sure he's going to have serious regret.
As those questions build, there is one more thing that hangs heavier than the rest. Why did this perfect day turn into the kind of night that still doesn't make sense? Even with the timelines pieced together, the calls logged, and the 911 audio out in the world, nothing about that night feels finished. How does a family go from popcorn and a movie to gunshots in a bedroom in a matter of hours? What exactly happened in that argument that no one will talk about? And what did Trevor say to his sister, the one person who heard him between the murders and his confession? That's so important, investigators are still keeping it under wraps. The reality is there is no version of this story where everyone walks away whole. And this reporter's words cut to the core of it all.
You know, you never know what goes on behind closed doors.
From the outside, the Lees looked like the kind of family people admired. Inside, something was broken enough to end in gunfire. Trevor's future now sits in the hands of prosecutors who have to decide if a 14-year-old belongs in a courtroom with grown men facing life sentences. The answer to that will shape not just his life, but how the community remembers this case for years. And until the day those court doors open, the big questions will keep echoing. Was this an impulsive moment that spiraled, or is it the result of a much deeper fracture people refused to see? Will the truth about those final calls ever come out? And is there anything anyone could have done to stop a perfect son from becoming a confessed killer?